Hey, welcome back to the Oz Shift podcast. We have a great one for you today. It's Katie Horwitch. She's the author of Want Yourself, Shift Your Self-Talk and Unearth the Strength in Who You Were All Along. And it's a really cool conversation. It's not just about that book. It's really about you. Like, who are you? How are you developed? What's the underlying conversation? If you ever have negative self-talk in your life, like this is a conversation you want to hear because all of us have it, but it's what you do, right? How do you develop this desire to want yourself? How do you develop a sense of confidence to step forward in the next stage of your life and develop something cool? Because we all have this aspirational journey to go do and create and be somebody and be something, but the path to that is not always clear. And I don't think a lot of it is tactical, whereas she walks you through some ways to make that happen. So without any further ado, let's hop into the episode with Katie Horwitch. Well, hello. Welcome back to the show. We have another amazing guest, which is it's a good thing with this podcast. We happen to have a great situation where people send us amazing human beings, which this person is another amazing human being. I had a chance to obviously we call it pre-record window. You chat, you can tell pretty quickly when someone has the ability to bring joy, to have some kind of intelligence, which is awesome. And I believe we're going to be able to unpack some really cool nuggets for your life. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Katie Horwitch. How are you?
I am so thrilled to be here with you. I loved our pre-recording conversation, and I'm so happy to really dive in.
Yeah. So the good thing is you listened to a couple episodes, so you know the question coming up. I don't know if you actually prepared for it, so I'm curious to see if you did. But I'm going to say it to those who maybe were listening new, because maybe your audience of people have come over here. The first question's a basic one. It opens up the gates of our discussion. And here's how it is. You can be super bashful. You can be super boastful, completely up to you. But let's say I'm sitting in a coffee shop. I sit down next to this beautiful woman. It's you. I don't know who you are. You don't know who I am. For some reason, you feel compelled to turn and start talking to me. In your opinion, why should I listen to you?
Well, because I am an introvert and a highly sensitive person. So if I have come over and started talking to you on my own, it means that there is something meaningful that I believe can happen when we are in conversation together.
It's good. What would be the things that you find you could share that are meaningful? Because while I definitely understand there's going to be because I just, I think a lot of individuals who do kind of what we do, I think people think we run around all day and like screaming at our neighbors and like top of the morning to you. Like I'm usually chilling at my house. I'm an introverted extrovert, so to speak. But what are the things that are deeply important to you? Like if you were in that situation and you did feel compelled, like what can you think of in your mind might compel you to have a discussion with a stranger?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think that as someone who is the opposite of you, so I am a gregarious introvert. Some would consider me a more extroverted introvert. I am someone who people usually mistake for someone who must be so outgoing, so all over the place. But I do keep to myself a lot. And that's not because I am an intensely guarded person. It's because I am a professional noticer. It is because I'm always paying attention and I'm always soaking in, let's just call it data from the people and the world around me. And so a deep and meaningful conversation to me in this type of environment, right? So I'm not giving a keynote, I'm not doing a workshop, I'm not coming to you and saying, here, listen to me for an hour. I think that to me would be based on something that I have noticed in you and something that I have gotten curious about. Because I think a lot of times when people talk about getting curious about other people, or especially as adults, like making friends as an adult, it can feel really daunting because we think we have to be out there all of the time and we have to be doing all of this small talk all of the time, which a lot of people will say that they feel like they're allergic to, or they just feel awkward while doing. And I find that if you sort of reverse engineer the situation and say, okay, What's the type of connection I want to have? How do I want to feel? How do I want to feel after? And then, most importantly to me, how do I want the other person to feel after we've interacted? That can sort of guide how you approach whatever conversation you're in, because I really do care. I care about the conversation we're having, and I care about our interaction. What I care really the most about is the so what of it. What happens after? What happens next and next and next?
Depth of intentionality there. And I think most, sir, if you're an introvert, like there's definitely got to be a good reason you came out and had a conversation. And I think that there is the tie to actually caring about the human. The intentionality you're talking to is not, I think, carried by many people. Like they say, read the room. You know, some people can't. My 14-year-old, he can't read the room. He'll just do things like, dude, shut your mouth, right? But but I think there is like when I think for me is maybe for you too. When I show up in the world, I actually do care that you leave the conversation better. Like I care that you actually get something from our interaction in some manner. And if I'm not paying attention to what you're saying, then all of a sudden I'm just here talking about something and I've talked about myself for 30 minutes and you're like, God, can this guy stop talking about himself, right? And there is a uniqueness to when you do that and do it properly, you can actually establish and create some amazing relationships, that started with you meeting somebody random in a coffee shop, right? So where did this develop for you? Because that's always a thing that, because if you have this intense curiosity, maybe it's an intense desire to kind of hear, I get to be a professional listener, or if we want to call it that. Like I kind of had that when I would go to different NFL teams because you don't know how to show up and how to speak and like not say the wrong thing. So I would sit and listen to the room for a while. But here's what I noticed. Because like a second question, first question, where'd you learn? The second question is, do you find that people think you're stuck up because you don't talk? Because I got that people thought I was judgy because I wouldn't say anything. I'm like, dude, I don't know what to say. I don't want to look stupid. I'm not judging you. I'm judging me, right? But where'd you develop this? And do you ever have that kind of conversation? People go like, why don't you talk?
That is a fantastic, both of those are fantastic questions, but that second one is really interesting. I'll get to the second one in a second. The first
Yeah.
one is that people talk about how they were when they were a kid, getting back to who they were before the world told them who to be, back when they were wild and free. I was born like this.
Mhm.
I do not recall any moment where I felt wild and free and unencumbered by the world. I really came out of the womb hypersensitive and a hyper noticer.
Mhm.
So not just hypersensitive as in like my feelings would get hurt easily, hypersensitive to the lights in the room,
Mhm.
the noises around me. I would walk into a room and I could tell you what sort of demeanor, what type of day everybody had had before anyone said a word. I was just constantly taking in information. And
Mhm.
I think that for me, I feel very grateful that that was not something that was discouraged in me overtly. That being said, I am a baby of the 80s, child
Same.
of the 90s. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, when we were growing up, it was all about being the loudest, the most confident, especially as a woman. I think that there was sort of a push and pull that happened that we would see, especially in the media,
Mhm.
where we could be confident, but not too much. A lot of times confidence or being, I don't even want to say outspoken, but
Mhm.
having a strong opinion that could be seen as narcissistic or
Yeah.
vain. And so I think that while I was noticing the world around me all of the time, I think what ended up happening is I developed for better, for worse, a real knack at being sort of a social chameleon, if you will. Because I didn't want to be pegged as someone who was off putting because I didn't talk a lot. I also didn't want to be pegged as someone who was full of herself because she had a lot of opinions or she reveled in her accomplishments. I think that that skill was honed more and more throughout my life in the wonderful moments, but also in the tougher moments that maybe we would say, oh, a kid shouldn't have to go through trying to figure out how they fit into a situation around them. I don't think it's good or bad. It kind of was what it was because I was who I was. And so to your second point of the conversation around, do people think that you are off-putting or you're not a nice person because you're not talking a lot? I think that, yeah, I think that for me, I very rarely ran into that, but it was because I was on such high alert. I also think that I came from a family of talkers and a lot of extroverts and a lot of talking over each other, not out of disrespect, but out of this is how we talk, this is how we bond. And I remember when my husband and I met, and he is a very, very introverted introvert. I remember when we met, he called me out on some tendencies that I had that I had picked up from growing up in my family where I felt like I needed to fill space. And he'd say, you know, silence is great. And I was like, silence is great. No one else is talking about this. So I think that, yeah, I think that I was aware of the perception. I've always been aware of the perception before I've had the chance to be perceived, which has been helpful sometimes and hurtful others.
Yeah, I can agree, man. Sometimes there's rooms I go into and me not talking is a problem, right? It's like, I don't know. Cause I think if also you don't talk, no one gets to know you, no one gets to like you. And then it's easy to have you removed from a group, right? So I learned pretty quickly, I need to find a way to enter the conversation is in rooms and environments. You kind of just got to test it as you go, right? And you may piss some people off, but as long as you're true to yourself, I think you can find a good groove there. I love that your husband said that silence is good. I've randomly stated this sentence in times, and I don't know where it came from, but I've always said, I don't do well with people that aren't settled inside. And it's not like an intention, like I don't like people. It's not that, but like I'll go to sometimes soccer games or football games with my kids, parents, my kids' teammates' parents. My kids' parents would be me, right? So I'll go to these games and I'll be sitting there and they won't shut up. And I'm like, they're nice people, but this thing and this thing. And I go, God, there's so much going on. I love the humans I can sit in a room with and I don't got to say a word to you for an hour and there's no issue. If I do say something, it could be a great conversation, but that's a human that's settled inside. And I feel like I have that with you, especially if your husband also saying that too, in a sense of like, you know what it's like to be like just calm and chill. Did you ever find yourself not having that? Then, because if your husband said, "Hey, it's good to be silent," how did you quell that? Because I do know a lot of individuals have that and are unaware. Some are aware, just don't care or don't know how to fix it. How did you get to the point of finding that space with you and your husband where you could learn to be quiet?
I think that for me, I would try and fill space in certain scenarios when I wanted a certain thing. Because I think, especially, you just gave a great example of being in a group of people that it might seem on the outside like they are me monsters, me, all of the time. I just want to keep talking. However, those people want something, right? Maybe those people don't feel like they are heard or have a lot of room to be heard in other points in their lives. Maybe they're external processors, right? I am a super internal processor, and sometimes I need to process out loud because I'm a human and not a robot, and I am not one thing all of the time. And so I think that when he said that to me, I already knew why I was filling the space in the particular moments that I was filling the space, but it was helpful to be called out on it by someone who loved me and wasn't criticizing me. And I think for me, what I and especially because sometimes I do this now, even when I find myself in more of a, let's just call it, a space filling mode. I think that it comes from a place of, I love your term unsettled. I think it comes from a place of trying to, if you think of a snow globe, all of the particles floating around, trying to force the settledness. I think that it comes from a place of trying to find connection with other people. I think that it comes from me being a recovered people pleaser or recovering people pleaser, where I want people to feel a part of something. And I think knowing that, I think recognizing the reasons behind why we act the way that we do, and recognizing the feelings that are underneath the feelings that we have, I think that can really create some really powerful shifts in our lives that don't involve, with practice, with habit, of course, because it'll feel hard at the beginning, but eventually don't involve feelings of guilt or shame or this narrative that develops. I talk about self talk all of the time. This self talk story that you write for yourself of, oh, I don't belong, or I'm just awkward, or I'm this thing. I think getting underneath to that information can be so powerful.
How'd you do that? Because I'm hearing it, I'm going, this is true. I think this is a commonality. I mean, a lot of people, you have to go through the stages. Even Eric Erickson has like the psychosocial concepts, like the stages you walk through as a human. And one of them is like role versus identity confusion. Because some people go like, well, here's my role in this situation, but who am I in this situation? I kind of hear that in what you're stating. How did you navigate that? Because I know how I did, but I want to know how you did, we'll call it. So what was the journey of you going through to get there?
Mm. Yeah. So, like I said, I grew up, came out of the womb,
Yeah.
hypersensitive, hyper noticer. And I walked through life that way. And I always had, like I said, this push and pull between this self confidence that I had, that settledness, to use your beautiful phrase, that settledness within me, and also that feeling that I shouldn't have it
Mm.
because that was not something that was modeled at the time as a strength to have. Again,
Mm.
especially in women, it was something that we were told we shouldn't have. We shouldn't be too loud. We shouldn't take pride in our accomplishments. I think,
Mm.
just as a tiny side note, I think the conversation that we have around mental health, around mental wellness, and around belief in oneself that we have now, we take for granted. That was not, as a fellow baby of the 80s, child of the 90s, like, this was not the conversation
Yeah.
that we
Shut
were
up.
privy to growing up.
Stop crying. Shut up. It's like,
Yeah,
all right.
suck it up, suck it up, suck it up.
Buttercup.
And
Yeah.
I think by the time I got to college, that really came to a head, because I think for many of us, we are put into a situation that for the first time, we are out of control. We're in a new environment. I had spent so long doing exactly what I just talked about, that level of, I don't even want to call it social chameleoning, but pretending for so
Mhm.
long to be able to form connections, to feel love, to feel a kinship, to feel a sense of, oh, I fit in here. I had
Yeah.
done that for so long that by the time I went to college, and I was a musical theater major, I went to University of California, Irvine, I
Mm.
felt like
Theater.
I was, yes, zot. I felt like I was out of control. And what ended up happening is I developed a whole host, Venn diagram really, of eating disorders and
Mm.
body related disorders.
Okay.
And yeah, and anyone who's gone through any sort of eating disorder or disorder having to do with food, body, exercise, you learn pretty quickly that it is actually not about the food or the body or the exercise. These are mental illnesses. And again, this is 2006, 2007. The conversation around those was not robust at that point
Mhm.
in time. It was very, very binary of, you either have this, you either have this. If you don't have these things, then maybe there's nothing wrong with you. That was the
Mhm.
conversation. And what I struggled with was a whole mishmash of things. And I realized that I needed to turn all of that hyper noticing that I had really honed throughout my life
Yeah.
onto myself if I wanted to move forward, because I knew there was something wrong with me, Anthony.
It's,
Right? Like, you're an
yeah. Yeah.
athlete, you're in
Yep.
touch with your body. You know when
Yeah.
there's something that's just not right.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, because at the moment I hear that, I go, oh, someone's going to hear that and go, that's wrong. And here's the thing. Here's how I heard that. To turn it on myself and say something wrong with me is not the common thought nowadays, which I think is a problem. I read these t-shirts or see these shirts, and one of them, this is so bad because I get that there is definitively some negative at a high level. People like have lost their lives in this concept. But I think the baseline of the comedy of it's what he says, bring back bullying. And I go, I get that. Because like if you don't brush your teeth and you stink, it's like, hey, stinky. And you go like, all right, I got to take a shower. Like that's the level I'm talking to, not the stuff we have going on. But the idea of turning it on yourself is not a common either stated thing to do or desired thing. But that 100%, I believe, is the way you do it. Because like when you mentioned sports, I could go out in a football field and get yelled at all day, but I didn't think I was trash. I just got yelled at. Or I would go watch film and go, I got to do this, this, and this better. That is not a thing that most people do nowadays. And I think that is why we have this just overarching level of people feeling like they just, man, I feel like I'm supposed to be great, but I don't feel great. And I have this almost like a weird internal battle because the world's telling them you're fine as you are. It's like, no, I don't think that's true. Like you are lovable as you are. You deserve love, appreciation, and care, but maybe you want something more that you really feel you don't have. You can't you can't go like, but I'm fine as I am and I don't have it. What's the problem? And you can't figure it out. It's like maybe you aren't fine as you are. So it's just a thought. But how did you navigate that? Because I think that's kind of what I'm hearing you went and did is like, okay, hey, Katie, you're not perfect. All right, what I got to work on.
Yeah. Well, and I think that so much of what I went through was this desire to be perfect. And
Mm,
this desire, especially as not just a theater major, but a musical theater major who's using her
yeah.
voice, who's using her body very much like an athlete uses their body.
Mhm.
I think that for me, it was literally affecting my voice. So I did not have the muscle and the breath strength to carry my voice in a song. So I knew that there was something that was not right. And I
Yeah.
think that when I say turning that hyper noticing onto myself versus the world around me and then just taking in the information, what I mean is not being hypercritical of myself, but giving myself feedback in the moment because there's a difference between criticism for criticism's sake and feedback that is going to help you move forward. And for me, I started to notice how I responded to the conversations around me, the feelings that would come up in me, the thoughts that would come up, the things that I heard and that I was paying attention to. And what I
Hmm.
realized is that this language of what I call casual negativity, so the negative talk that we use and many times use upon ourselves, that we use as emotionless as saying, the sky is blue, the walls are white. We say, I hate myself, I'm so awful, I can't do this, whatever it is. I realized that I had internalized that language so much throughout my life that it had become the language that I was fluent in
Mm,
without me even realizing it. And so what I realized was okay, well, in order to learn a new language, so to speak, I have to get underneath what is actually going on because I can't just look at myself in the mirror and tell myself, I love myself, I'm amazing,
mhm.
because, and there's studies that show this, because I don't already have the seed of belief in
Yeah.
that. So
Cognitive
how
dissonance.
do yeah, how do I develop that belief? And that's why I say if you want to shift your self-talk, you can't start with the talk part. You have to start with what's underneath it. You have to start with the self part.
Which is, I guess, a good piggyback or tie in your book, Want Yourself, right? So,
Mm.
how did that conversation, which we're having now, how did that lead to this book? And if you want to share the book real quick so people get kind of an idea of what it is, that'd be helpful. I think because, like,
Yes.
what's this new book he's talking about? So, just if you want to share that, we'll kind of come back to this conversation, I think.
Yes. So the book is called Want Yourself, Shift Your Self Talk and Unearth the Strength in Who You Were All Along. And the book's thesis statement really is that self talk isn't inherently good or bad. It's information. It's what we do with that information that informs what we do next and next and next. And in order to get to the core of that information, like I said, you have to start with the self part of the book. Well, you do start with the self part of the book You have to start with the self part of the equation, not the talk part, because the talk is symptomatic, right? The talk is like if you are not feeling well and you're coughing, and let's say that you take some medication to suppress the cough, maybe it'll make you feel better in the moment. But if you are chronically hacking, there's something else going on underneath. And so the book is really a blueprint on how to do that. Because I think something that we probably both come across in this type of line of work is that there are a lot of beautiful, sometimes pithy phrases that we'll see them on Instagram, we'll see them posted out, or maybe we'll hear them in a talk. Then you walk away and you're like, okay, but how do I do it? Like, I know I should believe I'm awesome, but how do I do it? And so the book is really the culmination of now 16 years of me researching, writing about, speaking about, and generally obsessing over why is it that we have the conversations that we have to ourselves about ourselves? And also, not just how do we shift them, but why does that shift matter in a way that is actually so much more important than we give it credit for and so urgent in the society that we live in? So hopefully the book can, walk people through that process, that they won't need me to hold their hand throughout, the entire way. They'll have this as a tool to put in their toolkit.
I agree. I think that's the way you ended that is very clear in terms of what I think is one of the big things, because I think as Hormozy says, you have to outwork your doubts, right? And it's a really clean statement that has so much weight to it. But I think like you have to create proof that you're amazing, right? And sometimes the proof you have is what causes the conversations of like, I don't have any. I stopped when I told myself I was going to do it. I cut myself short. I cut a corner. I didn't go for 3 months when I promised myself I would. You suck at, right? And it trickles in. But I do. I just told my son this the other day. We're driving the car with the family. He has this thing where his school stuff's not done, and he's not getting good test grades, and then the chores for the house. And I go, these are all just symptoms of an underlying issue you have. Like the symptom shows up in your inability. Like he needed his spikes to go to the track. And so he said, hey, my wife said, get the track. I got it done, mom. I got it done, mom. So like he put these spikes by the door. My wife checks it. It's the old spikes. They're not even the right size. And she goes, I'm not even going to change it. I go, I wouldn't change it either. I said, let's get there and let him deal with it. And I go, well, he goes, well, why didn't you guys change it? I go, because this is the same thing as to why when we say put the firewood away and cover it, you don't cover it and then it gets wet. And so we don't have any firewood, or you get the wrong spikes, or you're not getting the right grades in school because you're not studying at the right level. It's all just a symptom of the same issue of you want to find the shortest, least confrontational path to something. And the problem is it's not how you get great in anything.
Mm-hmm.
Right. If you want to, and so like, I love how your language is there. And then I do like the other kind of, I guess, segment to it, which is like the actual things you do change a conversation. I think the National Science Foundation did this study, and it said that some 85% of our 60,000 thoughts each day are negative, and like 90% are repetitive, right? So if you get fluent in that language, it's all you know. It's almost like you're stuck in this echo chamber of negativity. And what you're saying is, you can break it. So how does somebody shift the self-talk? Like if that's the conversation, which I think a lot of people have it. And I'm just saying, nobody doesn't have it at all. Like I have it too. I wake up and I go, am I okay? Am I good? Like I still do. I'm amazing at what I do. And I love what I do. But I think it's almost like a driving sense to check back in and go, are you still doing legit? You ate that. You shouldn't eat that. It's a holiday time. You didn't need 4 cinnamon rolls, but at least I can check. I don't know if people check, and I don't know if when they do check, it just anchors more negativity. And if it does, how does somebody shift their self-talk?
Well, I love that you talked about proof and proof points, because that is such a huge part of it. I
Mhm.
think that the first step for people, and I talk about this in the book, is really re redefining and kind of taking a second look at what we're doing in the first place. Because
Mhm.
I think a lot of people, I love that you brought up that you have the self talk and the negative self talk sometimes as well. I think a lot of people think of self talk in this binary of, well, either it's negative or positive. And it just is. That's how I like to think about it.
Mhm.
Self talk is self talk. It's the feelings that we have about what we say to ourselves that
Yeah.
actually informs how we feel about ourselves, what we do next. I think some people, when they say, "Oh, I don't really struggle with negative self-talk," I think, cool, that's great. And also, to me, that's kind of like when people say, "I never get tired." We are
Mm.
humans. We are, at some point in our lives, we're going to get tired. And it's not about staying awake
Yeah.
and not getting tired. It's about knowing what to do
Hmm.
when you get tired. Because if you aren't in the habit of, "Hey, I'm tired. I It's 10 p.m. I should probably go to sleep."
Yeah.
Or "I'm tired. I'm not going to run my long run this day." If you're not in that habit, then what you are in the habit of many times is judging that tiredness, right? "Oh, I shouldn't be tired. What's wrong with me?" It's the same with negative self talk. If something happens and you're feeling uncomfortable, or maybe you're feeling left out of something, that is something that is telling you about something that maybe
Yeah.
is really important to you. Maybe your
Mhm.
desire to connect, maybe something that's going on with you physically, mentally, emotionally. But so often, the feelings that we have about the feelings are the things that we focus on the most. And so, first step
Yeah.
is to tease all of that apart and
Hmm.
to get clear on, okay, what's going on underneath,
Hmm.
and how much of it is what's actually going on and how much of it is how I feel about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then talking about positivity and negativity, really reframing what it means to be positive in the first place. Because I don't define positivity as sunshine and rainbows. Real deal positivity that is actually lasting and sustainable is about being proactive, not reactive. And what's cool about this definition is that that allows you to go through the hard moments in life. It allows for the full breadth of human experience, and then gets you saying, "Okay, well, what next? How do I want to move forward versus how am I reacting?" So I
Yeah.
even did it physically, pulling back, responding to the external around me.
Hmm.
So, an example of that, like we were talking about pretending and being a social chameleon before,
Yeah.
maybe if you're doing that a lot, maybe a feeling that you have is, "I'm not good enough," or "I don't belong." You look at the information underneath all of that, it's that you want connection. And maybe you want connection and you're not fully being exactly who you are out
Hmm.
loud, because it's one thing to know who you are. It's a whole other thing to be who you are out
Yeah.
loud. So
Yeah. Michael.
maybe, yeah, like giving
Competence.
yourself proof that it's okay to be yourself out loud in the micro moments, the tiny moments before those
Yeah.
big moments happen that seem like everything's at stake, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I 100% get it. I think there's you also got to find the environments where you can be that because, there's certain things you can
Mhm.
say and do in some environments. Like they will make you think you're crazy. It's like just not your environment. But I think anything, I'm trying to think through all the stuff you said. What actually stood out to me was you said that no one can say essentially like you can't say you struggle with mental health because in my brain I go I don't think I struggle with not mental health but struggle with negative self talk. But I think the thing is I don't struggle with it but I have it, and I think and
Yeah.
it's just it's a language thing, right? Like I have it, but I don't know if it's a battle I have every day. It's not a struggle, but it does exist. But I think the reason is because what you eventually got to, which was the way that I perceive and have a positive perspective. And maybe that's why my brain didn't register, but I think language wise it works out in the same manner for you because you're essentially saying like it's an active thing. You're going to have craziness, right? Things are going to happen. It's just how you choose to see it. I got a guy doing work on my house right now, and we're about 30,000 over budget. Well, that's not fun, right? But at the end of the day, it's like the way that I can frame is like, did I mess up? Am I costing more money for our family? Like, and I go, now let me think through all of it. And I can logically frame it up, and I understand this piece. So like, I get to a point of going like, hey, at the end of the day, it's going to look beautiful. Money's abundant. We're going to find more and create more, consist. Like you just, and I can frame it differently. So as opposed to beating myself up and feeling horrible about this thing and feeling guilty about what the house looks like and the money, I go, all right, it's going to be good. And it looks beautiful. Then I frame it different. I feel different. But then I
Mhm.
thought about something that I had as an issue prior to being able to do this, which was a massive ego, which is what you're saying, the feeling about the feelings. And I think we don't give ourselves the ability to go like, hey, man, like you're having a bad day. Like,
Yeah.
because then your ego is like, no, we're not. Oh, I don't have bad days. Like, yeah, you do. You have bad days. Like you have a bad moment. They say, oh, I have a bad moment. I made it a bad day. Yeah. Because sometimes bad moments can make for a bad day. But there's this ego that I pulled aside and I go, you know what? I don't have to identify with this thing. I can just be who I am in this real time. And then I get the last part of your comment was like just being you in segments. And eventually when
Hmm.
you're you enough, you find that you delineate a line for those who belong and don't belong around you. I just had to figure who those people were, right? Because I'll say things, do things, talk about my life in certain ways. And some guy go, oh, I shouldn't be doing that. It's crazy. You shouldn't do your marriage like that. You shouldn't run a business like that. And then I would be like, oh, as a people pleaser, like, oh, I gotta make everybody happy. And I started realizing like, no, I don't. No, I don't. Not even a little bit. And so I go, this is going to be me. And then you just show up like that and you repel the people that aren't supposed to be with you and you attract the ones who are. But you have to first be bold enough to step out and do what you're talking to, I think.
And that will probably feel uncomfortable. If not, if not for a while, it'll probably feel uncomfortable at the beginning. And I think that a lot of times we can take that discomfort and sort of, again, talking about the feelings, we can take that discomfort and that stops us, right? Because we think we must be doing it wrong. But I think that if we can boil all of this down to something that is way more pragmatic than we give it credit for, and we look at it in terms of not necessarily this pie in the sky mindset shift type stuff, talking about it in terms of habit building. How do you build a habit? You have to make it habitual. And something does not feel habitual until you've done it for a while. It's like you're not going to go to the gym and pick up the heaviest weight right away. And when you pick it up, you either hurt yourself or you can't pick it up and you don't go, oh, well, I guess weightlifting is not for me. No, what you do is you start with the smaller, more manageable weights and you start to work up that trust in yourself that, oh, yes, I can pick that up. Or, oof, if that felt hard, it's okay for me to go down a weight because I know that I've got my own back. I love the example that you gave with your son because you were talking about these things that maybe on the outside seem like very small things. But I think trusting yourself, self trust, can be built in moments that are as small and as micro as saying, I said I was going to make my bed today, and so I am going to make it. Even if it's 9:30 p.m. and I'm gonna get into it in an hour, whatever it is, or there's dishes in the sink. Oh, I said I was gonna do them today. Well, maybe you only wash the knives that are in the sink. Those tiny moments, we think they don't matter, but they really, really do, because that's building that habit of self trust and figuring out, oh, yeah, I'm on my own side, which is going to allow you more readily to be yourself out loud, which then is going to allow you to, the next step of the process is staying yourself when tough times happen and stuff hits the fan and life keeps lifing, because it will keep lifing. How do you stay yourself in those moments? And then once you do that in sequence over and over and over again, then you have this deep sense of, oh, yeah, I want the self that I have and that I am.
I agree. I think it's a big piece of it is you have to build into that. It's all an action thing.
Mm-hmm.
I look at individuals who come to me because a lot of the work I do is an identity, right? It's an extension beyond mindset, in my opinion. I think a mindset it's inclusive within an identity.
Mm-hmm.
And people wonder like how these people have like the Midas touch. Everything they touch turns to gold. They got these crazy mindsets. And I try to tell them like they didn't wake up like that. All they did was they did a whole bunch of hard stuff. And actually the harder the better. And it created either a sense of actual trauma they had to fix and navigate through, or they had to use stress, the positive stress. Like you're mentioning, when you go to get the small
Mm-hmm.
weights you build, you're stressing the system, but you're building the muscle and building strength. And what happens is the more you do it, there's not a definitive moment when you wake up and go, God, I'm so confident. it's like it just happens. And then you look back and go, I don't know where it happened, but I got it now. And like you're saying is you've got to dial back to the habits. James Clear has the Atomic Habits book. I think BJ Fogg has one called Tiny Habits. There's a bunch of habits books. Charles Duhigg with the Power of Habit, right? All of them talk to this idea of the habits, and they really talk about how to create better ones, how to make your mind want to do it, how to instill a habit. But what nobody really in the books talks to is what happens in the long, like 6 months, a year. What happens to your identity when you've done this habit?
Mhm.
And that's the conversation I'm trying to spend time answering. And I think there is a tie to the work you're doing in a sense of like, yeah, I love myself to a depth that I never knew before, like 8 to 10 years ago, mostly
Mhm.
because of the stuff I fixed. Right? It's just not because of the things I broke, right? The things that messed a marriage up and all. It's because of how hard I worked to build it, and that's how I want myself. Title of your book is
Mhm.
the small things I did over time against the odds to where one day I woke up and I go, gosh, I don't know what day it happened. I couldn't tell you the moment, but man, some point along the line, like, I love this dude.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that there is this idea. I was in a conversation on another podcast where they were talking about how thoughts become things, and
Yeah.
I posed the question of like, what if our thoughts and our feelings and our beliefs that we have, what if those are all we are? And thoughts and feelings and beliefs, these are not small things. These are
Yeah.
things that are developed over time. Like that's, why so many people when they go to I'm a huge fan of therapy. Shout out to my therapist Rachel.
Mhm.
When people go to therapy and they're talking about things that maybe are happening now, after a few sessions, it's not always right away, you get to, oh, this is something that I've been carrying around for a really long time. And it's not a one and done type of thing. And I think that what you're talking about, as far as, the self that you're building in the long run, what happens after the habits, because I think there's a so what to that, right? Of, okay, I know that it's good to build good habits, helpful habits, if you will, but what is going to happen after
Mm.
that? Like, why am I doing this unless I have like some very specific goal attached? And I think that I mentioned it in passing earlier, but I do believe that our our self-talk is how we tell our story to
Mhm.
ourselves and to other people. And it's how we interact with the world and informs how we walk through the world.
Yeah.
And the world is an incredibly complicated place, and there there's a lot going on right now. There is a
Yeah.
lot that has been going on for many years now, decades, centuries.
Yeah.
What happens when you're in those situations is based on the self that you have developed and cultivated, that you're bringing into those situations. So self talk informs our relationship with power, with control, with unknowns, all
Mhm.
of these different things. That what I find and what I found in my work is that when people maybe don't have this solid sense of self, that's when a lot of very harmful othering starts to happen, or hopping onto bandwagons that are more harmful than hurtful because it feels good to be fighting against something and to
Yeah.
place that feeling of unsettledness. And so
Mhm.
I really do believe that these are habits that we are building for, it sounds cliche, but to be the change that we want to be in
Yeah.
the world. It's not a nice to have, it's a need to have.
I agree. I 100% agree. There's always a thought of like who you're becoming. There's this guy that had said some statement of like his mentor years ago. And this is going to be a sidebar to it, but I think it's tied in. He says, I want you to go out and make $1 million. He goes, it's not to make $1 million, but it's because of who you have to become to make $1 million. Obviously in a good way, not a. And so that journey of all that is really it's the hero's two journeys of what Joseph Campbell would say is like, you're working towards something, you're building towards something, but the achievement isn't the outcome you're desiring. It's the second, which is the who you became to achieve. And that's where I desire this. Well, you build this desire for self. You build this different sets of human in you. And then, yes, that person shows up to the world. Because I know, it's just like you do, there's an inevitability of problems coming in our lives. It's happening. It's a year away, 2 years away, it's 2 minutes away. I don't know. But like, I'm going to step in every day full fledged because I bring me to my problems. And that gives me a pure confidence. But I only had that because of things I did prior. And I think that's kind of what I'm hearing in you.
Yeah, there's this great, and I apologize for New York being New York out there right now. It's just so excited about the conversation we're having. There's this great quote from Oprah, and I'm such a fan of it that I actually put the transcript of the conversation in the book towards the end of the book.
Nice.
This great conversation that she had with Mike Wallace in, I believe it was 1986. Shout out to my birth year. And it was right before the show, the Oprah Winfrey Show went live and went on the air. And Mike Wallace says, "So the show that's underway," and she goes, "Yeah, it'll do well." And he goes, "Well, but what if it doesn't?" And she says, "Well, if it doesn't, I will still do well. I will do well, and I know I will do well because I'm not defined by the things I do. I'm not defined by a show. I think we're defined by the way that we treat others and the community that we have in our lives and all of these other things. And yes, it would be nice to be this acclaimed talk show host, but if it doesn't happen, there are other things that are important to me in my life. And I just love that interaction because obviously, spoiler alert, we know Oprah became Oprah. The show was a success.
Yeah.
And also, she had that solid sense of self to begin with. And I think so many times we can get swept up in these super, super tangible goals, like you said, earning $1 million, whatever it is. But then what happens once you're there? And what has been reported by everything from politicians to celebrities to sports stars to musicians, whatever, is that once you get the thing at the top of the mountain, it actually doesn't fix everything or solve everything in your life. You are you, are you, are you. And so I think that when people look towards what do I want in my life, I like to ask, okay, but who do you want to be when you get there?
100%.
Because that's the thing that is going to make that moment feel really sweet and also prevent you from, what's the saying, hanging your proverbial cap on that is the only thing and that is my worth. Developing that sense of value within yourself, asking yourself, what do I value about myself? That's what self-worth is. I think that is way more powerful than we realize, and it is a daily habit.
Yeah, I agree. That's you literally summed up the crux of what is my work is built upon. Because really, it is that. It's because I was my journey. That was my own dark work journey. I'm the football player, and then football's gone. Who am I without football? Then my marriage goes. Who am I without that? Like it took me to a real dark place until I realized that I akin it to like the fruit of a tree, right? I'm the fruit of my labor. The football, well, it fell off the tree and it rolled around and it got rotten. And I felt like, oh, I'm rotten. But I go, hey, guy, we've never been the fruit. We've always been the tree. And if you take care of the tree, you create more abundant and sweeter fruit in time. It may not look the same as that one, but it's going to feel just as good because you're anchored in who you are. So this has been a phenomenal conversation. I tell your brother, like, she's legit. Yeah.
Hey. Before we pressed record, I was saying that my brother was president of the pit crew at University of Oregon. He worked very closely with the team, with Nike, with all of the stuff, and he was very excited for this conversation. So I'm sure he's listening right now. Thank you, Alex, for making me sound very legit.
There you go, Alex. She's legit, bro. She gets the stamp. Two questions. Where do I send people who want more information on you, follow you, all that good stuff?
Yes, so they can find me at katiehorwitch.com, find out more about the work that I do on my platform, WANT, which stands for Women Against Negative Talk. It is for all genders. I just believe that these are conversations that women are having already. And so we really need to be spearheading these conversations if we want other people to have them. They can find the book at wantyourself.com, or as they say, wherever books are sold. And I am on Instagram at Katie Horwitch, and they can tune into my podcast, The Wantcast, wherever they listen and subscribe to their favorite shows like yours.
Love it, love it, love it. Thank you so much for that. Final question. I don't know if you know it, but here's how it goes. What promise did God or the Creator make to the world when they created you?
Ooh, what a wonderful question. They made the promise she will be exactly who she needs to be, nobody else. I think
It's good.
that's the best any of us can ask for, is to be exactly who we are
Mhm.
and get to the end of our lives and say, I was me throughout all of this. And I'm so happy that I can say this journey was truly my own.
It's beautiful. I don't think that people do that, especially in a world nowadays riddled with social media and trying to mimic and create and do what somebody else did. There is a power and a comfort and a peace and just being able to feel comfortable being you. And then there's like that mentality of like, you are here to do the thing that only you can do and only you can do it. So we need you to do that. If you do that, it's going to be golden. Because most of
Mhm.
the time, even from a biblical sense, I think the core of who we are is like already created, right? If you have that mentality and belief, and then it just gets a bunch of crap piled on top of it, like it's
Mhm.
a bunch of
Yeah.
beliefs and thoughts, and so you start adopting these things. Go, what's wrong with me? I go, you got to take it all off, like just be you. And then
Yeah.
when that person comes out, it's like that's who you're supposed to be, and then you find that it's much easier, it's lighter. Life is beautiful.
That's why the
Okay.
subtitle of the book is Unearth the Strength in Who You Were All Along, because I believe that finding yourself is not a search out there. It's a
Mm,
it's a dig. It's a dig in
yeah.
here.
I like it. Well done. Well, they had a good time. I know it's good when the time flies by, and I hit the time, which we somehow did. So I appreciate that. Thank you for being awesome. Those of you who are listening, thank you guys for hanging out with us. You could have been anywhere in the world doing anything, and you chose to come and spend some time with us. Or as one of my recent guests said, invest some time, because to spend is to diminish, but to invest is to get back. I like that.
Mm.
Outside of that, make sure you guys go and apply one thing you heard from today's podcast. I don't know how or where, just apply it and then share it with somebody else, someone who could take this nugget of information that you might be too close to help, but Katie's words can serve. Share it directly with them. And outside of all that, make the most of your off shift moments so you can make shift happen. It's Anthony Trucks and Katie Horwitch signing off. Hey, thank you for tuning in to the Awe Shift podcast. I pray that we gave something amazing to your life. And if you found this episode served you in some way, I would love if you could share it with people you know, people you love, as well as your community, because you never know who needs that simple little seed that can grow into something amazing for their life. And the actual training doesn't stop here. If you want your free copy of the show notes sent to you after every episode so you can get the major points consolidated down, simply go to textanthony.com and message the word notes. Till next time, make shift happen.